Good evening. Before we begin, I just want to remind all of you of something. It's easy to forget when times seem to be stressful or situations on the home front seem to be stressful, and you get up in the morning and you are instantly on guard or prepared for what may come. You're inclined, because of the spiritual path you're on, to do your best to look at everything with a balanced eye and to cope with everything to the best of your ability, forgetting that any anxiety you're feeling is a choice. And what will help you to remember that it's a choice rather than a given circumstance is that if you will choose to become still and meditate, you will find yourself moving into a place of peace. And having moved into the place of peace, you say, wow, I forgot that my peace is independent of any situation or circumstance. It's so easy to forget it because circumstances seem to grab your attention before you think to choose for your peace. Once having chosen for your peace, you are in a position to look at the circumstances with innocent eyes, with an ability to respond to the circumstances with a yes or a no from a centered place of real balance. And at this time, it's essential to remember this so that you make the choice for your peace before you look at and attempt to deal with the situations or circumstances. I just wanted to remind you of that. It is so easy to access your peace, but it's easier to forget to.
So we access our peace. We're in this centered place and we're looking at this problem that concerns us. From this place of peace, are there times when war is justified or even necessary?
There are times when the word no must be used and embodied, used and actualized, used and expressed into manifestation. It doesn't become a war unless somebody objects to the assertion of the meaning of the word no.
When we wake up and we choose for our peace. At what point does, I'm going to say the past, prior to asking for our peace, prior to waking up, the circumstances of no being said, the circumstances of being in relationship during a difficult time, will the claiming of peace, choosing for peace, change the circumstances as we had left them? Meaning that someone's not understanding the word no, or there is dispute. What is the change from the state of peace that changes the circumstance as it was left prior to claiming your peace, either the night before, the day before, the months before? So we wake up, we choose for peace, but the circumstances may not have changed, but the way we see it may have changed. Could you clarify what it will be different? If I'm being clear.
I'm going to ask you to try to rephrase the question. It is confusing to Paul, and the confusion has his attention.
Making it very simple. We go to bed in some level of dispute, whether it's internationally or in conflict with self or with relationship, one-on-one. We wake up in the morning maybe with chatter and the fear of waking up to this same difficult situation. As you've said, we choose then for peace and walk into the circumstance again. What has changed? What will be different? Or is it just the way we see it? Will we have changed our minds? Will we... I'll listen further. That's not clear.
Well, simply, the thing that will have changed from the night before is that where the night before you were not in your peace, now in the morning, after having arisen, you have chosen for your peace and you are in it. That's the fundamental change. Now comes, quote, the work, unquote, if you will. Because in your peace, you are primed for experiencing balance in your perspective. What causes fear is the busyness of your imagination coupled with your thinking. In the silence of peace, your imagination and your thinking are not introducing distraction and confusion. In the silence of your peace, your capacity to know what needs to be known is increased. And literally, you are able to see what is called for, which means what you are called upon to be in the circumstance. If you are called to say no, if you are called to withdraw support for unintelligent, unloving, unprincipled, unkind behavior, then you must get off the fence and cast your vote. Embody your part to play. When you do that, it will call for agreement, but it may get disagreement. If it gets disagreement, you cannot afford to let this have any effect on the vote you have cast. You cannot let it dissuade you from standing on the side of humanity as opposed to inhumanity, globally, nationally, or in your one-on-one relationships. Depending upon the intensity of the disagreement you receive, certain responses will be appropriate. If the disagreement is violent, if the disagreement constitutes an intent to harm, then your saying no must be firm enough, must be felt by you strongly enough from the tips of your toes to let it be an absolute no that does not allow for negotiation, but calls for obedience. That does not call for discussion, but requires obedience. Because the harmful behavior cannot be justified any further. It cannot be allowed any further. The power of no is what we're talking about here. If you say no, and it doesn't come from the tips of your toes, if you are not feeling it fully, if commitment to it, if identification with it is not total, the egos of those around you will recognize it and know that you are open for negotiation. And they will not respect the no, but will engage you in negotiation while continuing to behave inappropriately. You must learn to say no and yes with your whole being. Anything less, and you are playing a game. And those you say yes or no to weakly, weakly, will know that you have opened the door for argument, negotiation, discussion, anything but resolve. Because your yes and your no didn't call for resolve. You all get yourselves into ongoing, strenuous, negotiative, if that is a word, relationships by being neither hot nor cold, being neither yes or no. And you know what? Most of you find that to be an interesting and vigorous form of existing, as though the vigor of the negotiation is what constitutes the fullness of life, as though you're really doing something. When all along you're avoiding doing something and ultimately suffering the results of being neither hot nor cold. It is dangerous to your experience of divine life, of life full of the integrity of God, when you use your spirituality as a way of doing nothing. It is very dangerous to say, oh, it's all a perception anyway. Therefore, there's no reason for me to make any requirement upon my brother or my sister to be humane, to be principled, to be loving, because it's all a matter of perception. You know what? The course is a course in mind training. What do you think mind training is? It's learning to use discipline with and in your mind. using discipline means you say no and you say yes to certain things. And I've made it clear that without that discipline, you are unavailable to me to help in the process of awakening. Discipline. Learning when to say yes and when to say no. Learning what to say yes to and what to say no to. If you have a horse that has been trained, or a dog, like a seeing-eyed dog that has been trained, these animals have learned how to not do what is irrelevant to their function. And so, in an emergency, the guide dog doesn't go wild in the excitement of the commotion. It says no to its inclination to react and says yes to giving its full attention to its owner, to see that its owner is gotten out of the situation quickly and safely. Do not let irrational, metaphysical, or spiritual logic cause you to become lukewarm and immobilize you when action is called for. How foolish you will feel if after the situation that called for your clarity is over, you discover that if you hadn't moved in to this safety zone of being non-committal, you participated in a result that could have been avoided, a negative result. Now, if you are going to have to let your mind be trained to distinguish between essential and non-essential things in order to wake up, then grasp the transfer value of it so that you do not remain mute, immobilized, and ineffective where the call had been for you to be hot or cold, to be the presence of God that says no to that which is unlike God, and to say yes to that which supports. Fundamental quality of life, fundamental humanity, fundamental, I'll use the catchphrase, human rights. And honors them enough to bring them into fuller view. If your mind is going to need to be trained, the minds of others are going to need to be trained, and someone is going to have enough guts to provide the training, which means standing in the face of objection to your no and saying, yes, and here is why. Yes, and the reason is, and continuing to provide the clarifying and transformational perspective as I do over and over and over again until the one objecting to it grasps it, until the light bulb goes on. But let's not be spiritually, no, let us not be spiritual imbeciles and not restrain the willful expression of hate and harm by anyone, whether it's an abusive husband or an abusive wife or an abusive child or an abusive parent or an abusive head of state. You say no, and obedience must come into play to the extent that acts of hate, acts of harm, and the development of better and better ways to harm others is obediently stopped without negotiation, discussion, or argument. There is no intelligence and there is no love in allowing harm to be engaged in. If the individual is not in a frame of mind to learn something new and insists on continuing to act hatefully, you stop the actions in whatever way works. Once you have their attention and they are distracted from engaging in acts of harm, reason with them, reason with them, reason with them from your peace, and re-educate. Re-educate by presenting intelligence in such a wonderfully desirable way that it's hard to object to it. Now, you might say, well, that would mean I'm acting as their friend. And yes, that's true. You act as their friend by forcibly stopping acts of harm. In other words, going completely against their will, which would make you seem not to be a friend, because you're not considering all the reasons and justifications they're using to back up their behavior. But once having stopped it, you do not treat them as though they are hateful. You treat them as though they are one who is capable of recognizing the value of humaneness. And you educate over and over and over and over again, not as a form of brainwashing, but as an act of love, coming from love, so that the light bulbs can go on in their mind, and they finally say, oh, I see. I'm sorry.